Welcome to the 2024 Parent Webinar Series held by Winner Circle Inc. in collaboration with Camp Transition. My name is Jennifer Burrows, and I will be your host for this evening. This evening, we are diving into session 2, which is entitled Supporting Your Child, How to Be Their Best Cheerleader. And this evening, we will be hearing from Miss Shelley Herbert. But before we begin, we would like to hear from you. We would love to know who is on today. So go ahead and drop your name in the chat and tell us something that you are grateful for today. Tell us something that you are grateful for. It's so lovely to have you. And we are excited for this evening session. Let's see who will be the first to introduce themselves and tell us what you are grateful for. Persons are still trickling in. Good evening, good evening. It's so lovely to have you with us this evening. All right, so I'm waiting for our responses. We want to know who you are. We want to know something about you. So tell us your name and tell us something that you are grateful for. I can go first. It's not a problem at all. So I am Jennifer Burrows. I'm your host for this evening. And I am grateful for a beautiful day. It's a sunny day outside. It would have been a perfect beach day, but I am grateful. All right, good evening, Tracia. She is grateful for sessions like these that help equip parents with the tools needed to assist our children. Good evening, Tracy. It's good to have you with us. Good evening, Jay Maloney. Janice. Good evening, Janice. She is grateful for words of encouragement. We all need it. We all need it. Good evening, Janice. It's good to have you with us. Good evening, Natalie Carbon. She is grateful for this opportunity to learn and be inspired. Good evening, Natalie. All right. All righty. Anybody else? Good evening, Alicia Bradford. She is grateful for our family. And she is also grateful for sessions like these that can assist her in being a better parent. Good evening, Kimberly Rollins. She is grateful for this opportunity to continue to improve her parenting skills. And good evening to Misha. All right, so it's lovely to have you all. It seems like everyone is eager to learn this evening, and so we will all be learning together. All right, so I am going to go ahead and start us off with a word of prayer. Heavenly Father God, we thank you so much for your goodness. We thank you for your love, your mercy, and your grace. We thank you for the gift of life and health and strength. We thank you for bringing us together again so that we can learn and so that every parent here can be equipped with the knowledge and the tools and the resources needed to better parent their children and to guide and equip them in this new chapter as they transition from primary to secondary school. I ask that you would divinely and supernaturally assist Miss Herbert as she delivers her presentation this evening. And we ask that this would be an evening of learning and an evening of fun also. And we just ask that your presence would be with us this evening. And we give you thanks and praise in Jesus' name. Amen and amen. All right, so once again, good evening. Welcome to the 2024 Parent Webinar Sessions, which are held by Winner Circle Inc. in collaboration with Camp Transition. These webinars are all for the purpose of equipping parents as their children make that significant transition from primary to secondary school. Winner Circle Inc. is spearheaded by Madam Justice Barbara Cook Aline, and Camp Transition is spearheaded by Mrs. Margaret Grant. And we are going to hear from them now, and I will pass it over to Madam Justice to give some opening remarks about Winner Circle Inc. So welcome, Madam Justice.
Thank you, Jennifer. Good evening, everyone. A warm welcome to our parents and guardians for sitting in. And like you, I'm always interested to learn. Your questions going to make me think otherwise, and I know everything, which is a good thing. You can't know everything. So I'm looking forward to your interaction with this because it's a very interactive webinar. I would have developed this idea in 2008 when I was sitting as a magistrate in the juvenile court. I was concerned that children weren't aware that at a certain age you can be charged for their actions. They'll be at primary school doing the same acts and nothing could happen because they hadn't reached the age of 11 as yet. So I thought it was necessary to let them know about the age of criminal responsibility and to have a holistic picture as well for them to get ready for secondary school. It is not an easy transition from primary to secondary. It's a complete different structure of education. We wanted to settle in perfectly within the first term, so we thought we would develop it. I reached out to the National Task Force on Crime Prevention, now called Criminal Research and Planning Unit, and given the idea of looking at certain topics that were prominent in the court at the time. We recognized that puberty was happening, to reach out to family plans to talk about your body and you. And the emphasis is on that is on being chaste, that you have no sex at this age or in your teen years because you cannot take care of a child and add a burden to your family structure. So we looked at that as well. We looked at bullying. It's been around forever. They never leave us, but at least children need to know how to deal with bullying. That's one of the topics that we cover. Deal with a bully, who to report it to, how should you put yourself across. If you're too shy, you want to be a target. So you try to tell them to make sure they don't look shy and actually stay in company and don't be alone. A bully likes to do a thing on alone and not when you're in company. So we thought it was a necessary product that we must have as well to discuss. We looked at gambling. At that time, that was a prominent activity in the secondary schools. And we actually centered on that as well as drug awareness. Drug awareness, generally not the possession or smoking, because you find that when we do the tests on them, including drug tests, they may be at court for a theft crime, but yet their body is high in content of marijuana, and recognize a connection between how they're acting out, the use of that in their theft or in any other act as well, in violence as well. So it's necessary to let them know that they should say no to drugs. We looked at the law and you as well. There were interesting crimes that only children could commit. With our new act, those laws will be repealed, and the age will now increase from 11 to 12 years old when you can be charged for a crime. So we thought it important to let them know about those laws that apply to them at the time. We couldn't do this without having the parents know what we were discussing with their children and to actually enhance their parenting skills. So we brought on the parent webinars as a necessary component to the whole project. We were able to do all of the primary schools in Barbados to 1919 with the help of the Real Holy Memorial Trust. I want to thank them for that opportunity for sponsoring us right now into this year, 2024, to make it possible. We couldn't have done it without them. Today, you're going to hear something quite interesting, supporting your children. I grew up in an era where parents didn't have to publicly support their children at any activity. That era is no long gone. Parenting is a different aspect as well. So I'm sure you're going to be delighted to hear Ms. Herbert explain to you what is expected of you and the impact that it has on children. So I thank you very much for being here this afternoon. Sit back, relax, do ask your questions. Every question is welcome, and anyone can answer it for you. If Ms. Herbert is answering something other than what she's talking about, you want to ask one of us, if we can help, we would definitely answer it, Ms. Grant and myself. So welcome again, and Ms. Herbert, thank you for being here. We look forward to a wonderful webinar with you, with your wealth of experience coming over to us as well. So thank you, everyone, and good afternoon.
Thank you, Madam Justice, for your opening remarks. All right, Mrs. Grant, we'll pass it over to you.
Okay. Good afternoon to everyone, and it is really great to be here today. I do recognize some names from Camp Transition, but for those of you who do not know about Camp Transition, I will just share a few things. Camp Transition, we started in 2010 as a follow-on and as a supplement to the book Entering Secondary School, which I co-authored along with Shante Walters. And since then, Camp has developed because we are about teaching children the how rather than the what. how do you, know that you've gotten into secondary school, how do you really cope? How do you really manage all the changes that you have to adjust to? But as we move on through the years, we realize that other children, there were other transition jumps throughout the school that children had to leap over. And those children who started first form, but who did not really do well, that can really be overwhelming for some children. It can be disturbing for some parents. And therefore, we thought that it would be good to arrest those children at that time so that they can recognize that even though they started on a bad foot, they do not have to remain on that leg. They can shift. Yeah, they can make a paradigm shift and they can get back on track. And the only way they can get back on track is by helping them to reflect on how they got there in the first place. And therefore, that is how Camp Transition developed the Fresh Start Focus, which is the intermediate group. But then we went a little further. You realize that those children who were into their teenage years, a number of things were happening. Independence was setting in, decision making in terms of career and lifelong decisions. Those were taking over their kind of thoughts. And we decided, no, these children need some help. They need some guidance. And we created then the Career Success and College Prep camp. With this camp, as the name implies, we focus a lot on career planning, and therefore they get to do assessments, career assessments, which are aligned with their personality. And this gives them a good idea as to the careers that will best suit them, the careers that they will be more successful in if they continue to pursue them. And in that camp, you also look at how, now that you know the career that you should pursue, how are you going to get there? So we show them how to get there by looking at training. They will do some career exploration, and we also look at the training that is necessary. What kind of school do you need to go to? What kind of schooling do you have to get? What level of education is necessary? And therefore, can this be done at the local level with the university here, the Barbados Community College, the SJPI, Samuel Jackman Prescott Institute of Technology, or would you have to go overseas? So those are some things that we look at. And then we also look at some personal development issues. Like we know these children will get into relationships at some point in time. The whole thing about sexual assault and date rape, those are pretty common in some of our teenage relationships. And therefore we wanted this year, we added that to the whole scenario so that students can really, campers can really be aware of signs of date rape, signs of sexual assault, and to be aware so that they can prevent it even from happening to them. So Camp Transition, that is basically what it is in a nutshell, where we focus a lot on all the different transitions. Camp Transition this year, like last year, it was sponsored by Sandy Lane Charitable Trust, where they actually help a number of children to get to the camp. And we are grateful to them for this. The Lions Club St. Michael, they also volunteered their time and they came in, and Lion Audrey did the devotions every morning. And there are others who stayed on and, just observe the children. In some cases, they help supervise. We also have Affinity Plus. They're sponsored a few of their children. And I would like to encourage you parents that if your children are not in any credit union right now, check out Affinity Plus. There are a lot of benefits that you can get. We had a wonderful career showcase yesterday. In fact, Camp Transition 2024, we finished yesterday, and we want to thank all you parents again for sending your children there. For those children, we know there are a number of children who did not make it. Some were traveling, etc. And then some who were sponsored were not able to make it, but we are going to make up to them during the first week in September. So if you know that your child was traveling and you weren't able to get to the camp, you can connect with us at camptransition@gmail.com or through Jennifer, and we will be able to add them to that group. It's going to be a small group, but we owe it to them since they were sponsored to help them to be ready to transition into secondary school. Okay, so thank you so much for being here. Thank you also for sharing the flyers, sharing the links, etc., because we want every parent, we will love every parent to be benefiting from these sessions. So thank you again so much.
Thank you, Mrs. Grant, for telling us about Camp Transition and the fantastic week that was had at Camp Transition 2024. All right, without further ado, we are going to be hearing from Miss Shelley Herbert. She is a teacher of English language, literature, theater arts, all to the CSEC level, communication studies, and literatures in English at the CAPE level. She has been an educator for over 18 years, most of which were spent at the St. Michael School. For the last 6 years, she has been working in the capacity of year head, for which 4 of those years she was specializing in the transition of first-year students to the world of secondary school. And this evening, Ms. Herbert is going to be speaking on supporting your child and how to be their best cheerleader. Welcome, Ms. Herbert.
Thank you so very much. Good afternoon, parents. I think that it goes without saying that parents and guardians are the loudest cheer section that a child has. But along with your cheering, there are others who are also invested and who are also cheering on the success of your child. And they would include the teaching and non-teaching staff at the school, the leadership team, as well as the Ministry of Education. But everything needs to be coordinated. Our cheering efforts need to be in unison. And when we are not on the same page, unfortunately, our cheering is not harmonious and we are not serving our children in the way that we want or we intend. And so we're out of sync and there is noise that is created. And the noise that is created causes confusion for all the parties. But unfortunately, it's the children who are impacted the most. And so this afternoon, what I'm hoping to do is to share with you some tips that I would have gleaned over the years to help have that transition to secondary school be as seamless as possible, to ensure that you're motivating your child and that you foster a harmonious relationship with the school. So as you grab your pom-poms to cheer on the child, the first thing I would say would be to encourage your son or your daughter to see his or her new school as the best fit. Also, encourage them to see it as a safe place, a safe space, because this institution is going to help your child grow. And as they grow, it's going to help them to fulfill their dreams. And so you need to make positive comments about the school that the child is attending. Bear in mind that they could be there for the next 5 to 7 years if it's a CAPE institution. And so this school is now going to be part of the child's extended family, and by extension, part of your family. And so I think that it is so very important that as orientation, from as early as orientation, ask questions about the school, arm yourself with information and knowledge about the institution, and prepare to be completely immersed in the school life. So school events, you would be there to support, for example, sports or community service outreach programs. Many schools do things like beach cleanups and book drives. Those are the things that you would need to be actively engaging in to show your child that you are also investing in this institution. And if they see that you have bought in, then they too will buy in as well. Also support the extracurricular activities at the school, bearing in mind that secondary school is one leg of their educational journey. And most colleges and universities are looking for well-rounded individuals. So team sports, being a member of a team sport, really would help your child as they move to the next level. And so you will be there holding their hand and cheering them on in all the school activities. I would also like to say that we need to actively avoid comparing the secondary school to the primary school, or if there's another sibling going to another secondary school, avoid comparing the schools. Understand that each school has its own culture, and to help with the seamless transition, it does not help to be hearing that another school is better or you prefer the way that this other school does X or Y. You need to appreciate all schools, their own culture, and they do what is best for them and what they have seen yield the kind of results that they wish. And so help your child to adopt or adapt to the culture of their new environment. And one of the ways you could do that is by helping them to embrace the school motto and the ethos of the school. And during orientation, the school handbooks are made available, whether online or you have a physical book. Have the child sit and read that handbook, that book of expectations from cover to cover. You too should be familiar with the expectations of the school so that everyone knows what to expect. Everybody's on the same page, so nothing is a surprise. Now, I do know that everybody is entitled to their own opinions about dress codes and jewelry, and oftentimes parents do not agree with the expectations that are outlined in the handbook. However, you need to support the school, and you also need to reinforce to your child that it is important it's very important to keep in line with the expectations, to ensure that you are valuing rules and structures and systems. Because parents, when you encourage students to bend the rule or to break it outright, what you are inadvertently suggesting to them is that it's fine to break rules. And the same way that they could break the school rule, they would eventually look to break yours, because that is the behavior that has been set up. And so it is important to help them to value rules and expectations. Also, the expectations that are set out in the student handbook are very much a part of the hidden curriculum that prepares the child for the world of work. So I'll give you an example. Most schools, students are not allowed to wear jewelry. And I was speaking to a fifth former about a chain that he wears constantly. And I confiscated the chain from him. And when his mom came on a separate issue, I handed her the chain and I requested that the chain not be worn back. And she said to me, "Oh, wait, I don't understand why he's wearing the chain, because when he goes to work with me, he knows that jewelry is not allowed at the deli where I work." And so here is this young man who, in the world of work, he cannot wear the chain, and he complies with it. And so the expectation of the school would have been a benefit to him if it is that he were actually complying with the rules. Because in the world of work, if you don't comply, what happens? And so note that the expectations are there not only for the time that they're there in the school system, but it is also to help them as they go further. We also have a situation where some parents encourage children to sell things at school, whether it be slime, whether it be lollipops from Price Mart. So they're bringing them in, they have them in their book bags, and they're walking around the school and selling. As far as I know, most schools, selling is prohibited. And though you may have a personal motivation for the reason why you're encouraging that, understand that the school is acting for the collective good, and selling would not be something that is encouraged, because you may see it as something that is harmless. You don't know who at home is preparing a happy brownie to sell, and that obviously has negative consequences all through the line. And so please don't encourage your children to sell. There are situations in school where they may have market days, or if your child knits or makes things during those market days, then they are encouraged, but through a protocol, through a system, to sell in school. So wait on the school if your child does have an entrepreneurial spirit, but don't go outside of the parameters of the school. The second thing that I would encourage you to do as you cheer on your son or your daughter would be to cooperate with the chain of command and to respect the chain of command at the school. So the chain would begin with the subject teacher. And from the subject teacher, the form teacher, then the head of department or the year head. After the year head, and you don't feel as though the situation has been remedied, you can go to the deputy and then to the principal. Unfortunately, persons today even bypass the principal, so they go straight to the Ministry of Education. But I want you to think about it. Should you go to the Ministry of Education or the principal, what do they then have to do? Not go back down to the person where there may be an issue. And so I think if you're looking to solve problems, it's best to solve the problem closest to the problem than having to go all the way up just simply to come right the way back down. So attack the problem or solve the problem right at the issue. I think that that is very, very important, and it helps for harmonious relationships. And the child sees that there is an environment where open communication is happening, and it's not a situation where you are going above somebody's head, but that you respect that this is a professional and you should be able to deal with them and the issue be resolved. I find that in listening to teachers across the islands, what is creeping in is a situation where, okay, you're not bothering with the Ministry of Education, or you're not going to deal with the principal. Parents are coming into the school to confront the teacher. Now, I want to ask that you be on guard against that, because if you come onto a school compound and you create a ruckus, you create a disturbance, you are breaking the law. And it is quite possible that the school then could decide to bar you from the premises. Everything needs to be done in order, and you want to conduct yourself as a role model for your child. You don't want to show your child that in this society you need to keep noise or you need to threaten people in order to get things done. That is certainly not the model. And so you make an appointment. Parents do tend to show up at schools, but what is the job of the teacher? To be in a classroom teaching. And so they're not just sitting down there where they can have an audience with you, And so the best thing to do is to make an appointment. Even before the appointment, you can send an email and see if matters could be resolved via the email. If not, you make the appointment to see the person in person and go from there and go through the correct channels so that you have a seamless relationship, because in many schools, if it is a subject teacher issue, that subject teacher may be working with those students not only in Form 1, but they may take them all the way up to Form 3 or all the way up to CXC Form 5. And so you want to ensure that you're fostering positive relationships with everyone. The third piece of advice that I would give would also be in supporting your son or daughter, be an active member of the PTA. School PTAs are vibrant associations which allow you to network with other parents, but they also allow you to be in the know as to what is happening at the school. What are the general objectives? Are they looking to get a new school bus? Are they looking to renovate the bathrooms? So that you could be involved in those projects. And once you know, then it is you can help and support the school. If you are not able to join the PTA and be an active member, you can go to the PTA meetings, because it is through the PTA that if you have issues, you can give voice to those issues. You have audience with the principal, and it is that perhaps things could be resolved in that way. And so an active member of the PTA is what I would suggest. If that is not possible, because some PTA meetings are in the evenings, school evenings, and not on the weekend. And so that does not always work for persons. And some are always face-to-face and not online. Be involved in a parent chat group. And some schools have PTA chat groups. But the purpose for these chat groups would be to act as reminders, homework reminders, text reminders. If you have resources that you find on YouTube that helped your son or your daughter, you can share them. The purpose of the chat is not to malign a student or to cry down the school or a teacher. The purpose of being in the parent chat is to have support from persons like yourself and to look for positive ways to help the children. And being negative, always looking at what is not working, does not help the children. Being the person who is, okay, I see this problem, but I think that this is one of the ways that it could be resolved. That is the way to help the child. And the child also sees, once again, that buy-in, because you're looking to make things better. A fourth point, and it's kind of an aside, and it's a little outside of the scope of the school, but it becomes an issue in school. And that is first formers who are in chats with other first formers that are unsupervised. Now, because the children go to the same school and maybe in the same form, understand that they are now meeting one another. And you do not know what are the morals or the perspectives, the global worldview of the children or their parents. And so it's like inviting 30 children to a sleepover at somebody's house and you don't know them. You don't know the people who are at the sleepover. But in your mind, it is, they're all in the same form, they're all in the same school. But honestly, you do not know. And so if your child is going to be in a chat, even if it's for the right motive, which is homework, understand if that chat is not supervised by parents, it devolves into foul language, the spreading of pornography. Sometimes they don't even recognize that that is what they're doing because they're 11. So they do need to be supervised. Sometimes very unkind things are said. There are times when children are quite vulnerable in these chats and may say something like, my pet died. And what they receive is not support or comfort, but it's like, okay, so. And that can hurt the child's feelings and make them feel alienated. So I would say avoid having children in chat groups where there are no adults present. It is that they should be supervised. And yes, we're living in a technological age and the children are quite tech savvy, but at the end of the day, they're 11 years old and they're now posturing to present who they are. I'm the funniest, I'm the most mature. And sometimes to prove that they're mature, they open the door to a lot of things that are far too advanced for them. And so have the children avoid the chat groups. And I did say that the WhatsApp chat is outside the domain of the school, but sometimes it is that it does impact the classroom because this person called somebody else a name. Then if they're put in the same group to do a project, it's a problem. People putting on their statuses that they're going to fight this person, or putting up a picture of if a child fell, something that they think is funny. The chat groups open a whole door to a world that is not kind. And so forgive me for harping on it, but I've seen far too many classes disrupted because of WhatsApp chats where children are not supervised, to recognize that it is a major problem. Another thing that you can do, parents, from as early as orientation, or some schools call it registration, be as transparent as possible about whatever issues concern your son, your daughter, or your ward, whether that be health, eyesight, family dynamics, if there was a death, if the child has been dealing with anger management, if there's an issue with stealing. I know that sometimes we feel, I don't want to share this, and we feel vulnerable, but the child is going into a new family arrangement, and the only way persons can look out and protect that child and give them that special motivation that they may need or require is if they know. So I'll give you an example. The student in question was on medication to help them remain calm. If they're not on the medication, they will get agitated. They're also not allowed to drink any caffeine, any like soda, Coke, nothing with caffeine. It is sports, and the parents decide, okay, today you don't have to take your medication, and they're given lunch money, which they're not usually given because they usually bring to school a packed lunch. And the first thing the child does, they buy 3 Cokes and they consume them back to back to back. So they're not on the medication to stay calm, and they have ingested all of these stimulants, and they end up causing a fight. When the parents are brought in because the behavior is unusual and certainly the behavior needs to be addressed, then all of those issues were revealed. So the child has been at school for several weeks and they could have befriended somebody who at the time could have bought them a Coke. Most schools don't sell soft drinks any longer, but the school needs to be notified because how can you protect them? How can you protect others if you do not know the issue? A child who, yes, you see somebody wearing glasses and you figure that because they wear glasses, well, the problem is fixed. But that might not be the case. And so if your child needs larger print text, for example, you need to let the school know so that on the school's end, they could put things in place so that that child is not disadvantaged. So it's a matter of recognizing that you're dealing with professionals who are going to deal with the issue in a professional way, but you need to be transparent so that situations don't happen up. Then you have to put things in place. Things could be put in place from the very beginning. In addition to that, I think everybody wants their child protected and persons believe that they have the best advice. But if your advice borders anywhere toward violence being the answer to solve the problem, you need to halt that advice immediately. And it can be so subtle, and not that that was your intention. And I give you an example. The parent says to the child, you know, when I went to school, this little girl used to harass me all the time, always pulling on my hair, always pulling on my hair. And one day I had enough. And she came, she went to yank my hair, and I held on to her hand and I bit her hard. And you know, she never came back around me. Now, week 1 at school, the child encounters not somebody who's harassing them, but somebody who is playing in the classroom and they don't appreciate how they're playing. And so they take the child's hand and they bite them. But when the parents are called in and the parent is told, well, you know, your child repeated the story, parents like, but that was not my intention to have her bite anyone. And the child looked at the parent, a look that suggested, but that is what you told me. That's what I got from what you said. And so we need to be very careful. Violence is never the answer. And the fact that they are 11 years old, if they assault anyone, the parent of the victim can bring in the police. And so it is a serious issue. I heard of a situation once where a young man, 11 years old, pushed another one off of a chair because the boy had his pen. And when the parent was contacted to say, you know, this is undesirable behavior, the parent said, but he could protect his property as he sees fit. Of course, that is not the case. And if it were $20, what would he have done to that other child? So we need to be very cautious how we're instructing our children. They are not in the school by themselves. They're surrounded by adults who care for them. And if anything is happening, encourage your child to seek the help of one of those adults. Generally, it would be the form teacher because that is the individual that they see both morning and afternoon for morning registration and afternoon registration. It could be the year head, it could be the deputy, it could be anyone on staff, but encourage the children to seek the help of an adult and not to take matters into their own hands. Another piece of advice that I would give, and I know that it would sound strange because it goes contrary to everything that is popular. Currently, cell phones are not allowed at schools. That is a rule. However, parents arm everybody, including the 11-year-olds, with cell phones. What you don't recognize is that although you may give them the instruction, only turn on the phone when you're going to call me in the afternoon to find out about the pickup, that is not what happens. Some students, and I've seen it myself, where I've walked into a room, the bell has rung for 8 o'clock, and a child's head is down, and their fingers are busy. They're playing a game. And that is how they start their school day, by playing a game. So their head is not on what is the first lesson, or whether they have completed their homework, or have they thoroughly prepared for the test. Their mind is on the game. At lunch, students make TikTok videos. Now, some of the videos are truly quite innocent, but others are not. Some are quite suggestive with dances that are not appropriate. They could not have or could not make the TikTok video in school uniform if they did not have the phone. I think that, like all things, though you love your 11-year-olds and you see that they are intelligent, and truly they are, you would not let them get behind the wheel of a car and start it and move on down the road because you figure they could be trusted. The cell phone is similar. Until they demonstrate that they can exercise the kind of restraint that is necessary, I would suggest not to allow them to take the phones to school. If it is absolutely necessary, find out if the school has a policy where the child could log in the phone in the morning and come and collect it in the afternoon. Some of the children, the activities with the phone, they really do cross the border into illegal activity, taking pictures of members of staff and putting it up on their statuses, recording videos of students in the bathroom. They see it as a joke and their intention is to delete it. But before they delete it, they share it with somebody. The activity is wrong. And understand that at 11, they see it as harmless, but those pictures can get around. And so the best thing is to keep the phone at home and in an environment where they can be supervised, because the cell phones, the tablets, the laptops, all of these things, unfortunately, though they can help the children with homework, are often not used for that purpose, and they become distractions. And so we have to help the children to guard against distraction. As a cheerleader, oftentimes you need to look at the activity on the field to know whether to raise the chair, to know whether the audience needs just a little more enthusiasm. Similarly, with your son or daughter, when they come home from school, you need to be that sounding board. You also need to be observant. Has their personality changed? If so, why? And when they're talking, it's not a matter of filling in the gaps. Let them tell you themselves what is happening. I recognize that from my own experience. So let me give you an example. The child was caught cursing, and it was in earshot of a teacher. And so the teacher asked, "What did you just say?" And they lied. And then the teacher is like, "But I heard you," and asked the students that the child was with, and they were like, "Yes, he did curse." And he came to me, so the teacher sent him to the year head. He came to me, he told me what he said, he told me how he lied to the teacher, and then he explained what he should have done, and that he doesn't normally curse, but it was just the situation, and he's highly apologetic. I said, okay, that's not a problem, but you could be apologetic, but you need to watch your language. And so we're gonna have a little word with mommy. And he said, no, ma'am, I will talk to her. I said, okay. I called his mom nonetheless, and I explained to the mom the fact that he will be with me, and we're going to work on when to say what to say and having that self-control. And she said, okay, well, don't tell him that you've spoken to me. I'm going to see if he's going to tell me himself. So the weekend passes. So bear in mind, this child has come to me without the teacher and explained the full situation. Good. The weekend comes, goes, and the mom calls me and she says, Miss Herbert, he said nothing to me. He said nothing. How is it that you got him to say to you? I said, well, ma'am, it is repeatedly. I help the children to appreciate lies don't help, and that part of their journey here is growing into young men and young women. And at the end of the day, your integrity is what makes you a young man or a young woman, a good young man or a good young woman. And so they know that about me. They know that they can come and tell me without judgment, because at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is to help them to be better, but you can't judge them. If a person feels judged, they will never say anything. And so they need to know that they could say something to you and you're not going to judge them for the mistake that they may have made in that moment, but that they're going to help you that you're going to help them, to move forward. And so you need to be a sounding board. You need to be able to listen without judging, without being quick to anger or to say to them, well, I taught you better. It is in the moment, they did not use the kind of discernment that they should have, but they need to be able to come to you and say to you that this is happening and look to move forward. When a child cannot speak to you, things are going to start happening, grades are going to start dropping, personality is going to start changing, and there's very little that can be done in that moment to get things back. So you need to be the parent who listens. And also, as I said, be observant, look for changes in behavior, changes in attitudes, and try to draw out from the child what is happening, what has contributed to this. 2 more points. The penultimate point, I think, manage your expectations with regard to the school, with regard to how things are done. Understand that you are working with professionals, and make sure that if there is an issue or a problem, that persons understands what it is that is the core of your concern. Make sure that you voice that concern and that in that interaction, you feel as though you're heard. And obviously, you can gauge that by what the person is saying to you. But I think managing expectations is very important. There are some parents, unfortunately, you're in secondary school now, so you need to be in charge. In primary school, I was helping you with homework. I was very hands-on, but now you are at secondary school. That's not the parent I will be now. Well, obviously, that is a very difficult transition and perhaps not the best transition. Maybe you're not helping with homework as much as before, but you can't now have a complete hands-off approach. And so I have witnessed where parents would come in at the end of term one. Oh, but how is my child failing X, Y, and Z? But in the afternoons, are you looking at the textbook? Are you looking at the notebooks? Are you going on the Google Classroom and looking to see if the child is handing in the assignments? Are you looking at the quality of the work that they're doing for homework? And it seems to me that it is, in some cases, when the report comes in, that the parent actually understands, oh, there, you're not doing well in this subject. But the report comes in at the end of 13 weeks, sometimes 12 weeks. How can it be that for 12 weeks, you did not realize that there was a struggle? It would suggest that the communication is not as open and that another approach needs to be made to ensure that the quality of the work that is submitted, that the child is spending sufficient time revising, those are the things that would be needed. So a very hands-on approach so that there is no surprise by the end of term, but it would be more what needs to be put in place to help you, the child, to move forward in the subject. Finally, I think that just as when they were little and you tell them, when you get to the sidewalk, you need to look left, you need to look right, and look back again. Every morning, you need to be saying to them that they are responsible and they are accountable for their actions. We are living in a society where persons know rights, but don't seem to recognize that their responsibilities, and in addition to responsibilities, there is accountability. And as we help these young people to go forward, it is so important that we sound down the fact that they must be accountable for their actions. So it is not a matter of hiding up. It's not a matter of finding excuses for why this happens. But this has happened, you now have to deal with the consequence. So that in future, they would be thinking of the consequence and not just the action in the moment. And so I would say that those are, I think there are 10, yes, 10 pieces of advice that as you are the cheerleader, that you bear in mind as you spirit your child forward through the journey of secondary school education. And so I think I will conclude here.
Thank you, Ms. Herbert. This was an excellent presentation. Not only did you encourage parents, but you also shared some very solid advice and practical strategies to prepare every parent to be a better cheerleader for their children as they make this significant transition from primary to secondary school. So thank you again, Miss Herbert. Parents, I hope that you all were taking notes because this was some good advice. This was solid wisdom. And so at this point, we are going to open up for a time of Q&A. And if there were any questions that you had as Miss Herbert shared her presentation, you can feel free to either drop those in the chat or you can use the raise hand function and you can go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question. Any questions for this evening at all? Okay, Alicia Braffett, you can go ahead and unmute and ask your question.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. It is not a question. I just wanted to concur with what you said. It was an exceptional session, very informative indeed. And I just wanted to say thank you, Ms. Herbert, as well. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing. Okay, so while we wait on some more questions, remember you can type your question in the chat or you can go ahead and raise your hand. I have one question, Miss Herbert. I know that you said it would, if there are children who have any challenges, whether it be, learning disabilities or learning challenges or even health problems, they should make that known to the form teacher from the get-go. My question is, how do we help the children to see that it's in their best interest? Because I recently spoke to a parent whose child has ADHD and her concern was that the child didn't want the others to know about this problem, but yet it is something that the teacher should be aware of. So how should how should parents go about explaining to their children that this is in fact in their best interest?
I think that one of the first things is to have the child see that this is now part of their extended family. And the same way that you would share with a family member, knowing that confidentiality would be enforced, I think that you need to trust the institution, and your child is not the only child with this issue. And it's not the only one that the school has dealt with. But the sooner that you help the child to recognize that their issue is not unique to them, but that there are others who know, and then also have strategies that can help them. But the only way that you could help is if you know, because generally speaking, you're not going to put the strategy in place with a child who does not have a challenge. And so they need to recognize that this is a help, this is an assistance. So a child with ADHD, you may actually send this child to the staff room for something because you know that they cannot remain in this space without moving, but you are going to now give them a purpose for moving so that you are helping them, you are giving them a purpose, and they're seeing that your help is intentional. And so I think that you recognize you're dealing with professionals and that everybody, and it's not just something I say, I truly, truly believe it, that the persons in the school have your child's best interest at heart.
Thank you for your response. We have another question in the chat. How do you encourage the child to be more responsible or take accountability for their actions? Oftentimes, the kids tell us what they think we want to hear.
Well, that's just it. That is just it. That I think if currently there are limited issues, you start asking them questions. So if this were to happen, what do you think that you should do? And you get from them where their thinking is at. Or when they come home to tell you about other students, which they're very quick to do. So what do you think should be done there? What do you think that that child should have done in that situation? And start getting them thinking about how would they react and what should be the reaction. Also, in many schools, when the children come in first form, they actually establish their classroom expectations. So the children are asked, what do you think would be the positive things that we would do in this class as a group? So they come up with the expectations, and they also come up with the consequences. Oftentimes, their consequences are quite harsh, but they understand that if persons do not buy into the collective, that there has to be a consequence. And so in your own homes, it will be a similar thing. What is expected when you come in the afternoon? Or by the morning, what is expected with regard to your school bag, that it's packed for the night, from the night in front, and that you've gone through your schedule to make sure you have all the requisite books. But now, what is the consequence if you do not have it? And unfortunately, what some parents will do, so the child goes to school, they have not packed their bag, they thought that mommy was going to pack it or daddy was going to pack it. They have not packed it. And parents will leave their job or leave wherever they live and come and bring the books for the child so that they may not have a lunchtime detention, or that they won't have to deal with the consequence of their action. And so I think in very small ways, allow the child to deal with the consequence and stop providing the safety net or the buffer. I actually had a parent say to me, Miss Herbert, this was my fault, because I usually pack the bag at night, but this particular night I could not do it. But at 11, the child should be packing their bag. It should not fall to the parents. And if they don't do it, then there must be a consequence. So I would think in your own home, small steps like that, give them responsibility and help them to see, well, if you don't follow through with the responsibility, there is a consequence. Because is that not what it is in life? If we don't follow through with the things that we're responsible for, we have to deal with the consequences.
Wonderful. Are there any other questions this evening? You can either drop it in the chat or you can raise your hand. Okay, I'm going to assume that Ms. Herbert did such an excellent job that you answered all of the questions in your presentation. So Ms. Herbert, once again, we at Winners Circle Inc. and Camp Transition want to extend a heartfelt thank you to you for coming out this evening and for sharing with all the parents and for leaving us all with practical strategies that can be adopted as the students make the transition from primary to secondary school. Thank you once again, Ms. Herbert. Okay, so as you know, today was session 2 of our 5-part webinar series, and I am going to go ahead and share the remaining webinars with you. So last week we had the transition to secondary school with Mrs. Margaret Grant, and today we would have had the second session with Miss Shelley Herbert, supporting your child, how to be their best cheerleader. Next week, we are going to be having session 3, realities of secondary school life, what parents need to know. We're going to be hearing from Mr. Maurice Beckles, who is a Technology for Development Officer with UNICEF Barbados. We are also going to be hearing from Mrs. Keisha King-Ben, who is a parent, and we're going to be hearing the parental perspective. And we will also be hearing from Mr. Dimitri Hoyt, who is a student at the University of the West Indies, and you're going to be hearing his journey as a student throughout secondary school and what he believes the parents need to know. So we are going to be meeting next week, 24th of August, next Saturday, from 4 to 5:15 as well. And then we have session 4, which is going to be emotionally intelligent parenting, and that is going to be led by Mr. Tony Alton. He is an executive leadership development trainer, and we are going to be tuning into that on August 31st, same 4 p.m. And last but not least, we're going to be ending with session 5, and that is going to be held by Madam Justice Barbara Cook Aline herself. And the topic is going to be you, your child, and the law. And you can also reach out to me for more information, either at 837-3515 or at winnercirclecoordinator@gmail.com. The recordings for the webinars will be made shortly available for last week's session and for today's session. And so if you would like to have the recording, or if you have a friend who you know would benefit from the recording, please go ahead and email winnercirclecoordinator@gmail.com, and we will be able to share the recordings with you. You have listened to us for the past hour, and we would also love to hear from you. And so I just dropped a link to a very, very short Google form. We would love some feedback from you from today's session. We would love to know how the session was for you, what were your highlights and your key takeaways, and also what we can do to improve these sessions and make them better for next time. At this point, we also would love to extend a great thank you to our sponsors for this year's webinars and our 2024 programs, the Maria Holder Memorial Trust. They have helped to make all of this possible for us and for you. And so we also want to extend a great thank you to the trust as well. And so at this time, I will pass it over to Mrs. Grant, who will share her closing remarks for the evening on behalf of Camp Transition.
Okay, good afternoon once again. And we have come to the end of a second session, which has been very insightful. I hope parents that you found it to be insightful and recognize that nothing is insignificant in your child's life at this point in time. So I want to wish all of you the very best. And as Jennifer said, if you have any questions whatsoever, please contact her. We are available to help you. No question is dumb. No question is useless. Once you have a concern, please deal with it. And now is the best time to deal with it before school begins, okay? So we are here for you, and please reach out if possible, okay? Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Grant, and I'll pass it over to Madam Justice Barbara Aline to give her closing remarks as well.
Thank you, Jennifer. I want to thank Ms. Herbert for that great exploration of what to expect at secondary school, and shared her own personal experience with the children and the parents. And I think that made a significant input to the children and to the parents and they can be questions that we can ask based on what was said by Ms. Herbert. I think she covered questions that you wouldn't have thought of from her experience. I want to thank her for that. To you, the parents, I'm going to assume that you took in everything, so no questions were necessary. As Ms. Grant said, if there's any questions you have for any of us, just email it to Jennifer. We can ask them for you. Thank you for being here this afternoon. Look forward to see you next Saturday. So thank you very much.
And a big thank you to Madam Justice and Mrs. Grant for putting on webinars like these as well. Yes, so we thank you so much for making this available for us all. Thank you again, Ms. Herbert. Thank you to our sponsors, the Maria Holder Memorial Trust. And parents, we will see you same time next week, same link next Saturday at 4 p.m., where we will be hearing about the realities of secondary school and what every parent needs to know. Bye.
What is Winner's Circle Inc.?
This 2008 registered charity prepares children for the transition from primary to secondary school.
Are parents involved?
Yes, parents are sensitized about the important role they play in this process and their children's development.
Winner's Circle Inc., helping you be a winner by making the right choice.